Welcome, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Kim Canning, and I serve as the Vice President for University Partnerships at Kaplan. Today, though, I would like to make note that this conversation is about the state of higher education today relative to student success and career and workforce readiness. It just so happens to be brought to you by Inside Higher Ed and Kaplan. I could tell you about Kaplan, our work, and our award-winning initiative, All Access, all day. But today, the focus is on these outstanding voices in higher education who will introduce themselves in just a moment. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, especially with these panelists, as we chat about what student success looks like, how student success supports students being ready for their next step after graduation, and the innovative programs our panelists are focused on with their organizations and campuses. I'm so pleased to moderate this conversation and hope you each take away glimpses of their work, just as I have while getting to know them. Before we jump in, we have a little bit of an alphabet soup of programs. For people who aren't from New York, I just want to make sure that we dive into your programs. What is EOP? What is C-STEP? What is HEOP? To make sure that we're setting the stage for our broader conversation. But Joe, let's start with you since you're a little bit more straightforward.
Thanks, Kim. Great to be here. Joe Testani, Deputy the President of the University of Rochester. I've been working in higher education for 20 plus years, mainly in the career education space. So this topic is near and dear to my heart in thinking about how we prepare students for their trajectory once they leave our higher education communities. So I've been working in public and private institutions, as consultant for higher ed and ed tech companies, and now as the deputy to the president working on the university strategic plan, which has components that really focus on experiential learning, student success, and really preparing the citizens of the future and what our responsibility is to our students that choose to come to the University of Rochester. So looking forward to a great conversation and looking forward to hearing from our other panelists as well.
Right. Looking forward to hearing more details about that work. Ronaldo, through our partnership with CSTEP, you and I have known each other for almost 20 years. So would you like to jump in and talk about Apex?
And it's been a delightful 20 years. Let
Sure
me
has.
just add to that. Sure. My name is Ronaldo Alba. I am the president of the Association of Program Administrators of C-STEP and STEP program. What C-STEP and STEP are programs designed to increase the number of underrepresented students and economically disadvantaged students in STEM, health, and licensed fields. That's essentially what our charge is and the responsibility, and what we are catalysts of change in our individual campuses. Right now, we're a network of 134 projects throughout New York State. We're 56 pre-college STEP programs, which serve as on-ramps into the university setting. And we have 78 C-STEP projects throughout the state of New York that work with undergraduates and really in dynamic ways to ensure that students are prepared, supported, and directed to enter the workforce in STEM health and license fields, or should they choose professional training and graduate school training in those professions. And we're a dynamic network of projects within the New York State Education Department portfolio of college and access and opportunity.
Awesome. Well, it's been fun to be along for the ride over the last 20 years as your partner. Cheryl and Aaron, we're more recently started to work together. Cheryl, can you talk about how EOP supports SUNY students?
Sure. So just as an introduction, I'm Cheryl Hamilton, Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Life and Opportunities and the Student Advocate for SUNY System Administration. I have the privilege of working closely with our student affairs professionals across our 64 SUNY campuses. And I also lead the Arthur O. Eve Educational Opportunity Program, known as EOP. Kim, you mentioned alphabet soup. So just explaining, the Educational Opportunity Program is a program for students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds enrolled in our SUNY system who demonstrate the potential to succeed. So I describe them as students of promise, students who demonstrate the potential but may fall short of the criteria for general admission to our institutions, largely because of socioeconomic factors. So we meet the students where they are. We provide a wide range of supports throughout their time at the university so our students can thrive, and we prepare them to enter graduate school or their careers, successfully. So we serve nearly 9,000 students across 55 campuses in SUNY, both state-operated campuses and community colleges. And we've had the honor over the past few years to work very closely with Kaplan, particularly with our pre-med opportunity program, preparing our EOP students for careers in medicine, and most recently with our EOP All Access test prep with Kaplan.
We're thrilled to have to be an all access, to have you as an all access partner. Cheryl, it's awesome. So
Thank you.
excited about that. Aaron, you want to jump in here?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Ray. I'm the Director of Opportunity Programs at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. I also serve as the president of HIAPO, which is the Higher Education Opportunity Program professional organization. HEOP is made up of 47 programs across 45 different institutions, and we span all the different regions of New York State. Like our cousins in EOP, we serve students who are economically oftentimes unable to afford college. Our students oftentimes have not had access, and so that's what our programs do. We provide access to independent colleges across New York State, and we work very closely, very intentionally with our students throughout their 4 years and oftentimes even beyond.
That's great. And we're excited to also have HEOP as a new all access partner. So thanks, Aaron. So to jump in, student success. Oh, first I want to say, I hope that you can see why this group of panelists, we are so excited to have them today. The diversity of students and campuses and programs that they represent is really incredible and powerful. And what we want to jump in today is how they are doing what they're doing and being successful at supporting students throughout their education and beyond. And so really excited to jump into the conversation. So student success can mean a lot of different things depending on your lens. Can you all tell us from your viewpoint how you define student success? And kind of based on that, what's your organization or institution's priorities for student success? And Cheryl, I'm going to start with you. If you can also kind of talk about the evolving needs of students today, kind of given the landscape, what's different and how have you maybe had to change your approach, or how are you going to change your approach?
Thank you so much for that question, Kim. And, obviously, we still look at the very traditional, definitions for student success, looking at, academic performance and graduation and retention, persistence. But we also are paying closer attention to student engagement and sense of belonging. In terms of needs of students, one of the things we're seeing both in EOP and in the student affairs community, we're just seeing more of our students coming in aware of the need to take advantage of mental health support. We have more students coming in looking for supports to address food insecurity, housing insecurity, basic needs. Students have learned how to succeed as online students, right? So we have to catch up and ensure that we are providing the supports that they need online. In SUNY, we're seeing an increase in the number of adult learners, students with children. So really looking at how we can provide the wraparound supports, again, system-wide, meeting the students where they are, providing the supports that they need. So that they can prepare successfully for their careers. We're also seeing that students are coming in a lot more career focused. Students are not necessarily coming in looking for, we're just going to pursue the traditional college degree. We want return on investment. We want to know that the programs that we're entering as undergraduate students are going to prepare us to successfully enter careers. So those are certainly some of the things we're seeing with this new cohort of students coming in.
So really everything, it's thinking about the student as a whole from the very start to the, throughout their career at your university, their experience at your universities, and then what they're going to do but thinking about the student as a whole, which is
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
Absolutely.
amazing. Joe, how is your university administration evolving around the definition of student success? And is there anything being asked of you that may have, may be different than it was a few years ago?
I think Cheryl hit on some really key pieces, and I would say that let's stress undergraduate and graduate students. I think that that's really a shifting too about what the expectations are for the graduate students coming in to the university. So I think it's not just traditionally focusing on the academic success of undergraduates, but what does that mean for our older students coming in? The basic needs is definitely has been an increase and what that looks like. And it changes the service orientation, but it also changes how we communicate and really think about the wraparound services for students. And it puts a strain and also a different expectation on the institutions and how we allocate resources and services because of that increased need. You know, at Rochester, we're a private institution, about 12,000 students, about half and half undergrad and graduate students. I think there's been definitely an over emphasis lately, especially since the pandemic, on learning resources and how do we help students learn? How do we help students navigate what AI means in this new sort of landscape and how that has changed teaching and learning for a lot of our students? And then you couple that with the basic needs, that puts a strain on faculty and what that classroom environment looks like. And so I think for us, putting it in as part of our strategic plan, I think has been critical to say it top down. We have to think about the holistic support for students top to bottom, not just getting them through academically and graduating them on time, but weaving the career and the wellness as from the first day they arrive here, and then launching them successfully, and then supporting them even as alumni from the institution. Because I think those first few jobs after they leave or going into graduate school, we still need to really support them as an institution. And I think that's our contract or a new contract with our students that I think's changed and evolved over the years. Whereas before you graduate them and you hope they give as alumni and stay connected, but I think now that relationship is evolving, and I think we want to see them more engaged. We want to see them giving back to the next generation of students as well. So I think the student success as a holistic, but also I think as a continual, more of a elongated experience and relationship with the institution, I think are some of the things that have changed that kind of builds off of what Cheryl really emphasized as like important, critical sort of shifts in terms of what that wraparound services or supports are needed.
So, obviously I can imagine with, tracking learning, that might be a little bit easier to track outputs and track success as we're talking about more kind of holistic. Maybe there's some additional challenges in tracking that. Ronaldo and Aaron, I'd love to hear from you on how you're thinking about tracking student success. What are the outcomes that you're focused on?
I'll go. I mean, and thanks for the question. And I think Cheryl and Joe really mentioned some key institutional values in terms of student success. But there's some programmatic behaviors that occur on campuses through our programs. And of course, tracking student success is the buzzword: data, data, data. I mean, if we, that's something that's almost like an elusive experience, because the more data you try to collect, you're like, well, what is this really telling our story? And what I will have to share is that first, beginning with the lens of student success is really considering the context where students are coming from. I think Cheryl had mentioned meeting students where they are. You really have to understand the context and how our programs are really created with the idea of access and opportunity. And that being tied to the civil rights movement, right? And how these programs sort of evolved. I think that's really critical to understand because we need to not only understand the academic needs, and the engagement needs. I mean, Cheryl mentioned sense of belonging. Everyone should have a copy of the various editions of Dr. Terrell Strayhorn's book on sense of belonging. That theory has really permeated all of higher education and really captures the essence of what it means to really be in a place where you really feel comfortable in. But what we also know is that we have to also assess for student social capital, the professional awareness, the how-tos of entering a professional, even how to practice, how to be a student at a college campus. And, the STEP and C-STEP programs uniquely, we're a network of 25,000 students over that. And STEP starts at the 7th grade. So we sort of have our pulse of what students are really experiencing beginning in 7th grade. And a lot of our institutions have both projects or both programs at their institutions. And what that does and what that allows C-STEP to do at the undergraduate campus is really reverse engineer an experience. for seventh graders. But what it also does is it allows us at the undergraduate level to forward think of what's actually going on real time within a generation. We don't have to wait a generation to learn about a generation, which is really critical. And I think I see Joe here nodding his head. He understands that as an institution, those are conversations that we're having. But the metrics that we're looking for sometimes are a little nuanced and on the cutting edge of things, because it's not really, how many students are passing, how many students are failing, how many students are on probation. I mean, that's almost like armchair hack kind of way of looking at data. The student sense of belonging data is really a lot richer, because if you could understand if a student feels comfortable, then you can really understand the different layers of what perhaps may be impeding them to really grow and thrive at the institution. When you look at academic advising practices at institutions, well, there's unique philosophies on that. The philosophy that we take in STEP and C-STEP is advising for retention first, right? Because if you lose a student, forget your success metrics. You're not successful. But advising for retention is a unique kind of way of really engaging a student, not only looking with them and going through the traditional major university core requirements, it's strategy. So brilliance can be hampered by a lack of strategy at institution. A student's coming of age and really comfort gets compromised if you're a pre-med student taking biochem and calc your first semester, and you're coming from a high school that perhaps is under-resourced, right? So it's common sense when you talk about it, but institutional practices sometimes interferes with common sense, and that rules the day, right? Because then we get behind our titles and so on. So, I mean, let me not get into all of this, because I think we're all nodding our heads. We know what we're talking about here, but really it's having a philosophy, understanding the context of your programs and why you're really charged with this work in higher ed, and then really having a way of conducting programming and advising to make sure your students are staying behind. So, Kim, I still haven't answered your question. I'm discussing the nuances here. And, and the fact of the matter is we probably need some attention to figure out what the data set of the moment is and what it should reflect in the future, because universities would benefit from that when looking at advising structures and models. The University Advising Center now model is caught fire throughout the country. The day and age of traditional deans managing a class of like 800 students, that hasn't worked, because not all 800 students are going to get the love and attention that they need. And so when you have programs like STEP, C-STEP, HEOP, EOP, they have to be relied on to be able to translate university values, programmatic values that, of course, are intertwined with student success. I still haven't answered your question, Kim. That's how nuanced this is. But we're all funded by we're all funded, and we have to provide formal reports. But the conversation about what data looks like, I think, is an entirely completely different webinar, to be honest with you. Not to evade your question, but
Well,
what
I
we
don't, and let me just pause you for a second. I don't actually think you're evading my question. I think you're
okay.
discussing the exact problem that probably a lot of our attendees face. It's how
Yeah.
do you quantify those kinds of things, and and I think part of the challenge is just voicing it and having the opportunity to share that experience so everybody can be thinking about it. Because sometimes, I mean, I have this a lot of times where I start thinking about something and I think I'm the only one thinking it. I don't think you are, Ronaldo, the only one
All right.
thinking that.
I appreciate that. Thank you
100%.
for not putting me in a waiting room, because I haven't answered your question yet. But what I would say is, and I want Aaron's perspective on this, because I think he provides a rich perspective as well, is the fact that data, qualitative and quantitative, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I think that's really important to point out for folks. Uh, if you're running an office and you don't have foot traffic, if you're in an office and you're trying to think and you have an absolute silence, you have a problem on your hands. It's supposed to be buzzing with life. It's supposed to be buzzing with your door being knocked on, actually people walking in without knocking. That shows a level of comfort of folks coming into a space and really feeling like they belong. Because, is it a home dynamic? Family, the family conversation could be tough, but I say, you know what? That's all that we know initially. And yes, it should be that level of comfort. And I think Aaron you can step into this, because I know, we put aside our paperwork, even our budget paperwork, to address student needs. And why don't you share what the HEOP philosophy is as well?
Yeah, so let me just start by saying the HEOP philosophy is very different than my wife's. I think my wife would appreciate if we didn't care so much about student success, so I could be home on time. But you know,
Fair.
HEOP, we're like a miniature college within a college. Folks who work in HEOP, we start to meet these students not as early as 7th grade, but as juniors in high school, seniors in high schools. Most directors or assistant directors are on the road recruiting, or they're doing online recruiting. We're getting to know students even before they step foot on campus. They step foot on campus in the summer for 4 to 6 weeks for our summer program, and that's where we really start to develop relationships with students, start to really get to know them, and also they start to know themselves. So when it comes to like success, how do we define success? It depends. It depends on each student and what their goals are, what their lived experiences are. So it requires a lot of reflection. All right. So that's what we're doing specifically at Hamilton. There's a lot of reflection points throughout their 4 years where they can identify what's working for them, what's not working for them, what are the things they're passionate about, what the things are that they aren't passionate about, and what resources should they take advantage of on campus. That's a lot to navigate as a 17 or 18-year-old. So success for me is when students come in and they may not have an idea of what they want to do, or they come in and they're going to be pre-med because that's what they know, that's what their parents know, that's what their grandparents know. And in 4 years, okay, they might not still be doing the same thing that they came in wanting to do, but they are excited, they are passionate, and they have a path forward to pursue the things they want to do. We do track the traditional metrics that's already been said, GPA, credits attempted versus credits earned, tutoring contact hours, advising contact hours, program attendance, and all that helps to inform us. But like Ronaldo said, if the office is quiet, if students aren't showing up, I think you have a pretty good metric that you're not finding a lot of success. But I'd be hard pressed to find an HEOP office that is not hustling and bustling.
Kim, can I just tag on to what Aaron was saying? Because I think part of the work that we also do, right? And when you understand context, and we'll talk about social capital, part of the self-evolution of a student has to be factored into the work. And that's what Aaron just mentioned, but also translating the skills that they do have is part of the validation, the affirmation, and the confidence building that's part of the work as well. So let me give you an example. If you show up at the general office and you have a student that's perhaps babysitting, lending a hand at home, that's something that we have to factor into our advising and center that in our work. Other places, other folks would say, well, you don't have priorities. Well, good luck to you if you don't understand the context of a student's life as an institution. That's something that as a pre-med advisor that we sit on the university's pre-health committee here at Fordham, that's what we translate for the students. They have the ability to carry out a disciplined schedule, contribute to the home in a different way. What physician do you not want that says I don't have time for my little sister or brother? These are things that we sort of translate, and we're able to capture a unique student narrative in a way that conveys the empathy, the humanity that's needed in the world. And so, with that, with running risk of being muted by someone else, I will stop there. But I wanted to add to that because I think these are conversations Aaron and I have when we see each other, and that's just something that I wanted to share with the audience that's here because we run away from final reports in the sense of saying that's not only what we're about. There are other things that we do that is not captured on the report. So thank you for that.
I'm so glad you said that, Ronaldo, because our students bring such strengths to our universities and colleges. Our students come in with such resilience. And while we're, I call our students of promise. People talk about our students being, by definition, our students are economically disadvantaged, yet they bring in so many strengths that they're able to capitalize on. I'm glad that Aaron mentioned the importance of the pre-freshman summer program. I view that really as one of the unique and strongest aspects of our New York State opportunity programs. So our students all come in through pre-freshman summer programs to prepare them to hit the ground running once the fall semester begins. And so much happens during those summer programs to prepare the students for success, to get them acclimated to college and university. They very much mirror what the students will experience during the academic year. And it is an opportunity to build the social capital referenced by Ronaldo. One of my favorite things during our pre-freshman summer program, we bring back our alumni. And often for our students, it is the first time that they meet individuals in the careers to which they aspire, who come from backgrounds similar to theirs, and they can ask those questions, and informal mentoring relationships form through that. And I think it's just so incredibly powerful. It's important when the campus president has the opportunity to come and welcome this group of incoming freshmen before they even start their freshman year. And so, I can't say enough about the role that the pre-freshman summer program has in preparing our students for success.
So I just want to take a moment and pause. I think everything that we just talked about really highlights how impactful all these different programs are, but also I hope that our audience can really take away that these are pieces. You don't have to have specifically EOP or specifically HEOP or specifically C-STEP, but that there's real learnings here that can be applied across campuses, which I'm sure a lot of our a lot of our audience that you are doing that. But I think it's just amazing to hear. This is why your programs are so important and impactful. I am going to take a little pause and go to a question from Serena Whitaker, who said, and I think this, Joe, you mentioned this, I think that it's great that students are coming to college more focused on careers. Can you speak about effective and innovative programming that your career services offices are offering? Are they working closer with faculty to embed career education into academic curriculums? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I think Cheryl mentioned, like, there's students are coming in with so much information on careers, more so than I think they had been before. And so I think that's, like, 20 years ago, like, they didn't know a lot about it, career. So we were trying to figure out how do you bring them information. Now it's a matter of helping them filter out information and figure out what's really resonating with them and really connecting. I think mentorship is really key. Getting them connected to people that are doing different careers, I think, is really critical. So I think that's been a cornerstone of a lot of the work that we've been doing, is connecting them to our alumni, connecting them to folks that are in industry, that are like them, that map to their identity. And I think that's something that we've kind of leaned into a lot. I think faculty and integration to curriculum is really important. Honestly, I think one of the big things we've been advocating and pushing for, I think we made some inroads here, we're not all the way there yet, is I really don't want students to have to opt into career education and thinking about it as something they should be doing on top of everything else they have responsibility for. How do we integrate it into their academic experience? How do we integrate it into their advising experience? I think that's the most important thing we can do for a lot of our students here. So we work with our academic advisors, we work with our faculty members. We've offered grants to faculty members to integrate experiential learning into their coursework. So really kind of elevating the coursework to really connect the dots for students so that they're experiencing what it means to be in different industry sectors. And I think in working with our HEOP offices and different offices that target specific populations, our first generation students, our international students, and really where the students are showing up and getting good advising, how do we integrate it into those services so it's more seamless and less that's another thing that our students have to do on top of all these other experiences. So faculty are critical, integration, we offer courses. So there's a variety of things we're doing to kind of remove that optionality out of it and really embed career decision-making and exposure into a lot more of the fabric of a student's experience at that university.
That's great. Cheryl, sorry, everybody's got such good information. It's hard to remember who said what. Cheryl, anything you'd like to add to that question?
Sure. And this actually also ties in with an earlier question in terms of how we measure student success. And one thing we're looking at a lot more closely in SUNY is student participation in high impact practices, whether that's undergraduate research or internships, service learning. And so we are promoting that more and partnering with faculty and ensuring that students have the opportunity to take advantage of these rich opportunities. And I said I wasn't going to highlight any particular campuses, but I will say that Binghamton University's Career Center works very closely with faculty members to integrate career education into the curriculum. There's great work happening in both curricular and co-curricular activities to promote career education there.
Can
Um,
I
I'm
jump
a
in?
Binghamton, I'm a Binghamton graduate, so Cheryl, thanks for shouting
Oh,
out Binghamton University. But I think that high impact practices is critical. That's the currency we have to, and I think that to me is where we start to help to balance the exposure and the mobility, the social mobility Ronaldo talked about earlier.
Right.
It's so critical because that starts to really create more of an equitable playing field for a lot of our students to get them exposure to community engaged learning, research opportunities, internship opportunities. And I think that's something that we're leaning into as well.
There's something that was touched on that if I can, may I?
absolutely.
Just because I think what we're talking about high impact practices, we're talking about these hybrid buzz terms. If you would allow me, without putting me in the waiting room, if you would allow me just to go to the central part of what this is about, we all understand as educators, we understand what differentiated learning is, right? We understand how important that is in the background into a student's life that learns differently. Well, this is differentiated services in a sort of way. Equity. There's certain buzz terms here that have been co-opted, and it's, have been misrepresented for those that don't understand the details of what equity is really about. And these programs, and I know there were some questions on whether or not these programs exist in other states. I'm not sure, but institutions also have some kind of model of this type of engagement that New York State has statewide. So let me just say I'm proud to be a New Yorker. I'll tell you that because this has been an investment into a future that has existed for 60 years, and they've accepted the reality and the idea of education lifting all boats is really not tied to what diversity, equity, and inclusion is really about, right? The concept that the way it's been co-opted that certain folks win, other people lose as a result is misinformation. That is not a fact. When you have members of a society that thrive at all sectors, the society also thrives. And when there's an imbalance, that's a problem. And with institutions that have HEOP, EOP, STEP, C-STEP, LPP, Gear Up, all these TRIO programs that now are under attack federally, it's an understanding that society thrives. And terms have been co-opted, language has been co-opted to create a divisive element. But these programs has really provided equitable services to ensure that all members of a society can really, benefit from the transformative impact of education. And I just wanted to use that opportunity, as we all come from this lens. We all come from this lens. And this institution like University of Rochester, Fordham University, the Jesuit institutions throughout the country, we all know this. Private institutions know this. The public institutions know this. We all know this. This is a marketing campaign that we haven't been able to combat, but we know what the elements of success are and what that means to society and our institutions. And so I just wanted to have the opportunity to talk about that openly because in a session like this with educators from around the country, I think that's something to really plant the flag on and really take pride in, and not let someone else divorce us from the values that we have and the facts that we know.
Thank you, Ronaldo. Erin, anything you wanted to jump in on? I want to make sure you have that opportunity.
No, I've seen all the questions in the chat, so we should probably move on. So
Okay.
we
Okay.
get to know.
So we have a very engaged audience. So I do have a couple of questions specifically, actually, Erin, for you. What system does your institution use to track data metrics like tutoring, attended, advising appointments, those kinds of things? And then, well, yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. I wish we had one magical platform that would do it all. We don't, but we do use some that folks on here might be familiar with. So for advising, we use Starfish. At Hamilton, we've rebranded it to be Compass because of navigating all the resources. And then for tutoring, our academic resource centers use Track Cloud. And so it's consistent across the 4 academic resource centers on campus. Students can book appointments, they get automatic reminders, and then we have access to that data. And we actually have a fellow for academic belonging who works for our office, but works with those academic resource centers to sort of track along how specifically our first year students are engaging in those centers. And then we're able to compare their attendance and the work that they do in those academic resource centers to the outcomes at the end of the semester. As you can imagine, the more students go to tutoring, the better their academic performance. Other things we use, we're a Workday campus now, newly Workday. We're in the process of building it out. So anyone who's implemented Workday on their campus, you know where we're at right now. But the student portion of Workday is going to be going in over the next couple of years. And so some of that advising and data collection will happen through Workday. And then I'll say our Career Center uses Handshake. So some of those systems communicate with each other better than others, but we're at least capturing everything. And if the right people are talking, we're able to synthesize that information.
So I just also wanted to double down on, I think we put this in the chat to answer a lot of these questions, but Ronaldo, we had a whole lot of questions around the book that you referenced, College Students' Sense of Belonging, A Key to Educational Success for All Students by Terrell Strayhorn. So I think if your chat's not up, take a look in the chat. I think we put a link to that book, but it seems like maybe we should have a Ronaldo book club.
Oh, we should have Terrell Strayhorn come.
I
Yes.
would love that. Let's do that next. I would
Wonderful.
love that. One other question just to follow up, I think again on Aaron's points, and I'm happy to have anybody jump in. How are you building the capacity to have long-term conversations and build those relationships with students over the long term?
Yeah, I'll take the first crack at it. So with HEOP, again, we're spending 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the program, with these students. And so specifically at Hamilton, I really push my staff to eat in the dining hall with students. We do some weekend programming, some evening programmings. I don't make it mandatory for staff, but we've built a culture where like staff want to, and students really appreciate getting to know us outside of our office, outside of the classroom. This summer we're taking students whitewater rafting. We'll see how that goes. But so as we get to know our students outside of the traditional context, it makes when something's not going well, it's a little bit easier for them to communicate with us. Or when we're there celebrating their wins, when we do come to them when something's not going well, they know we're not the principal's office. We're not just trying to like, oh, you're doing something wrong. So it doesn't happen overnight. Some students buy right in at the beginning, but some other students, it might take 2, 3 or so years to really build that trust. But oftentimes by the time HEOP students are graduating, they really have bought into the support model of HEOP, and the relationships that HEOP staff have with students continue on beyond. We're going to weddings, we're going to graduation parties, those sort of things. But it's not easy. It's very intentional. To do this work, you have to be intentional, and it does take up a lot of capacity, but it is rewarding work.
Yeah, I would just echo that. It's really just baked into our model, right? So we establish these trust relationships with the students before they even start their freshman year, so that once the academic year begins, the intentional advising makes sense. They've experienced this already. They know who their navigator is. Our advisors become everything for our students. The model is very holistic in that the advisors are providing academic advising, career development, personal counseling, assisting with financial literacy, and really helping the students to navigate the campus. And these relationships last, as Aaron said, well beyond graduation.
I think it's everything that you're talking about is about creating safe space, right? And you can only create safe space if you understand the context. Like everybody has been talking about the context of where the student has been, where they are now, and where they want to go, which is incredible. I do want to switch back a little bit around the career readiness, workforce preparedness conversation. Joe, we had a question, and I'm gonna ask you to take a first crack at this one. How do you convince traditional liberal arts institutional faculty to not be scared of career ready or career education programs?
I'll talk about webinars. I, I I think the reality is this, I guess when I arrived here, I think I was very intentional in that I wasn't trying to convince anyone to change their mind about anything in terms of what they did and the work that they were doing with students. We really kind of surfaced the students' voice. And I think we leaned into that and really kind of amplified this, what students were wanting and needing, and what their expectations were for their education when they arrived at the University of Rochester. And this is where other institutions I've been at as well, where we've had a lot of first generation students, same thing. Why are students coming to this institution? How do we surface that voice and that information so that faculty, I think, hear that and then can understand how to really merge what they do and what they see their charge as, especially at private or smaller liberal arts institutions, with the work that and the needs that students have. So I think I see our work as bridges to between the faculty and the students, and we have a responsibility in the work that we do to amplify the student voice and to really showcase that, and also bring data to the conversation to show them, right? I think in many of the cases, I think faculty want to see evidence of what we're talking about. So it's not anecdotal only, right? So what are students saying that they want? What kind of data? So we've done needs assessment surveys and surveys for students to be able to tell us or tell faculty what their interests are, showing them where our alumni are going as graduates. And those are really kind of the paths that they're choosing to participate in, and that those are the choices that they want to make. And then being able to work that back into those conversations, bringing those alumni back to help really tell the narrative to those faculty, I think have been really critical to helping that. I think we also targeted younger faculty. Younger faculty have a very different experience with career conversations than older faculty too. That's not denigrating our faculty that have been at institutions for a long time. I just think they've experienced the workforce very differently and what it means to enter a workforce and what industry looks like very differently. So I think we've been very deliberate about the type of faculty we would look towards. As a research university and many institutions that are research focused, the relationship between industry and universities continues to evolve. So how do we also basically draft off of those relationships to help convey those messages as well, right? Because many industries want relationships with institutions for their graduates and for the research opportunities that exist there. So I think those are some of the ways that we've tried to really engage faculty in more involved conversations around the needs of students. But I think the amplification of the student voice, I think, is really a critical piece of this.
So one of my kind of conversation or questions around university and employers, where it does seem that there's a little bit of a chasm between the expectations of what universities are doing with students versus what maybe
Sure.
employers think should be happening. I know you all have external partners with employers. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how those conversations have shifted or changing, how you would like them to change to maybe address some of that conversation going on? Ronaldo, do you want to start?
Sure, since you called on me, Kim.
Yeah.
I didn't want to jump in. But I mean, workforce needs and what institutions can provide. I mean, uh, let's not put our heads in the sand, as you mentioned earlier, and ignore what's going on in the world today and how we're separating ourselves from where STEM is. The defunding of STEM that's going on. That's creating a unique workforce shortage that we're going to feel for generations. And this is, I don't engage in hyperbole on this. This is going to have a detrimental impact to what we have. So what we sometimes the needs remain the same, the context and how things are the urgent need of acting on them sort of changes. So right now, a scientist is a scientist. the art of establishing a hypothesis, the scientific method hasn't changed. But those are simple practices that are always valued. I think sometimes the conversation about career readiness gets sort of a cold, gets is impacted by the institutional politics of what may be at hand when administration is looking to do certain things that faculty sort of distrust. And that sort of just permeates all over the work of an institution. But the fact of the matter is, we should not be across odds on this. A student that is employable is a student that can contribute to an institution monetarily, come back to lend their talents and perspectives to continue to develop your undergraduate class for the real work. Joe had mentioned, about younger faculty being more amenable to this because of their lived experiences and then the world of work and how that sort of evolved. We have to hold on to the folks that understand what technology has done to our society, and build those relationships. And I think those older folks, which I don't think there's only older folks, it's just a matter of personal disposition and philosophy that sometimes interrupts the collaboration. But engaging people in recognizing the reality of the times today and strengthening and reassuring students that pay a lot of tuition money, public or private. Folks are making an investment regardless, that they're going to have the skills, not only the skills, the awareness of how to navigate landscapes, and your career readiness coming from your Office of Career Services are essential partners in that, because they have colleagues that can talk about the varying ways of interviewing, how students are showing up at work, because all institutions get feedback. They receive feedback on the graduates. So if a student is not performing well in an institution or industry that values the time that they invested at your institution to recruit, you're going to hear about that. Joe, am I correct about this? Your chief of staff, I know you get those private messages at night and say, listen, that student is not connecting the dots and we need brighter stars in our galaxy. Please send them this way. But this is the reality, is that the career services cannot be separated. They cannot be the traditional hierarchy of faculty leading everything. That's not the way it works everywhere. And it's not working like that anymore. The world has been interrupted and has changed and has evolved, where everything is an equal partnership now. We have to translate for each other to reach the student, right? So faculty have an idea and that's what they're there for. Then that idea needs to be translated to a generation of students that perhaps may not be where the idea is to receive it well, but they need other professionals to come in and talk about career metrics, talk about the aspect of being career ready. We talked about end goal here. Let me just say this, if I can interrupt, because I think part of the work that's critical here is you have to have a model for having students secure internships and research opportunities. Experiential learning is how you get to the end point of being career ready. So I saw in the chat, translating student organizations, skill sets, that ties in directly. There's no, I'm a former student leader. I can't say I am now. I'm a bit removed from my time, but the student experience can be translated in so many different ways. Like I remember the social capital that we talked about earlier, but it's also the capital that you learn to develop at an institution as a student leader, as a part-time worker, at a retail store, folding clothes for 12 hours a day, have to deal with customer service. Every professional on campus needs to be engaging each other to make sure we're delivering a message. So are we talking then essentially about a branding concept of what being a professional is? I think so. You can't separate yourself from that anymore. We live in an IG world. If it's not on Instagram, it never happened. Remember, this is what the college students are saying. This is why they interrupt traffic and interrupt tours, take this picture. We need to understand and move into the world as well with our own branding message of what career readiness looks like and what that means for an institution that we're housed, and essentially for the entire sector is what we're going to have to do. So that's a long and quick answer there. Or contribution, as I say, not an answer. Contribution.
So I wanted to get one last audience question in before we kind of go to our final panelist question. And I hope I'm reading this right. So panelists, keep me, just make sure you understand this. Have any of you ran into a disengaged student population on your campus? I feel that my campus faculty and staff are engaged and involved with students, but it is not necessarily reciprocated by the students. Any strategies to navigate this issue? I feel like some of this is what we've talked about, but anything else that jumps to mind?
So, I worked at a different institution right before COVID, and then I jumped to Hamilton at the peak of COVID, and we transitioned out of the sort of Zoom hybrid weirdness. And for a couple of years, engagement felt different. Students were engaging in different ways, and I want to say like this past year was probably like the first new normal year where it felt a little bit more like pre-COVID. Granted, I wasn't here pre-COVID, but it felt like what I had experienced at my previous institution. Um, but what I can say is when students weren't as engaged, it was really important for us to receive student input on what they would engage with, right? And I think it was hard for us as professionals to conceptualize like, oh, they were on Zoom during the most like formative years around social engagement, right? And now we're about to bring in students who were in middle school. So like, you know, what they're going to be a little bit different than the students that we've had the last couple of years. And this might continue to evolve for the next decade. The way my daughter engages is very different than how I engaged in first grade. But it's really important. Like students know what they want sometimes. And so if you can pull that information from them and apply it to how your campus is engaging, just the fact that you're showing interest in hearing what they think and what they want to engage with should earn you a little bit more buy-in.
I think that highlights perspective, right? Well, it highlights perspective under, it may be that your faculty and staff, their perspective is we're super engaged, right? But maybe it's not the same engage, right? It's not understanding what the students want and or I think the other kind of theme here is the context of what students need and where they're coming from and what they can accept from that. Anybody else on this last question?
Yeah, Kamal, I think this is a really interesting question because I think what we really try to lean into is what's our value proposition. I think at the end of the day, you have to ask that question of your office, of your institution, but especially on the offices, the functional offices within the university. What value do you offer students, and do they understand that value in relationship to other choices that they have? And I think when we think about Career Center, where I used to work, did we offer a value that was different than what they could Google? And if the answer is no, then that is my competition, right? It's not other things on campus. It's that they think they can access information that they need to navigate the job market or looking for things somewhere else. And so I think that is a really important reflective exercise that many organizations and staff and faculty need to do is, are they providing a value to students? And I think students are looking at their experiences in college from a value proposition perspective, right? And I think if we start almost like looking at it almost like product development and what we offer, we have to disrupt their normal sort of noise that they're getting. They know they have to go to classes, but after that, they have a lot of choices as to how they want to spend their time. And I think we haven't necessarily stopped that. We expect them to engage with our offices because that's what they're supposed to do. And they're supposed to like look for a job or get an internship. But sometimes they're not going to do that until they're pressure prompted. So what's your value prop? How do you convey your value proposition to them, and are you actually listening? So we started doing almost like user experience research with students, finding out what are you spending your time with? Why aren't you coming to the office until it's pressure prompted? What else is like dominating your space and your time that you're choosing not to choose something that you know you actually need to do, but you're not choosing it at an early stage? And I think we learned a lot about what that looked like, and we learned a lot about maybe what our interventions could be and when we could engage them and who their influencers were as to like what choices they were going to make. So I think that I haven't seen a lot of offices really stop and think about like truly if they have value from the perspective of students, not necessarily just from the perspective of their own viewpoint of their offices or organizations.
Yeah, that's great.
Joe, are you saying that value doesn't live in any one corner, right? It's sort of a journey that's shared, and then we have to find each other along the road, right?
And it changes, right? With each student population that we're coming into the institution, I think it's evolving, right? And I think and for even within our student population, it's not homogenous, right? Each students have a perceived value of different offices or units differently because of what they bring to the table and their individual experience, what they show up to college with, right? So many of our students at our first gen, they don't have exposure points that we expect them to, other students we expect them to have. So how do we think about the value proposition of an office like a career or an internship for those students? So it's not even just value prop as a homogenous student body, but even the segmentation within our student bodies that we have at the institution.
Thanks, Kim. There
Yeah.
was comments from community college perspective that I was reading, or questions. Let's be clear, community college and the role that those institutions play are essential into all this. So career readiness, if it's not tied to a community college philosophy or curriculum, if that's still a debate, I'm very concerned for that institution, because essentially, we hope that students, they find the resources are in a situation they can continue on a 4-year journey. My mother was a 2-year community college grad and eventually 20 years later found her way back into a bachelor's program and eventually was able to continue on from there. But the community college is essential. I mean, there's no greater, um, if you're not career ready as a community college after 2 years, what are we doing? So the values across the board there at a community college is critical just as it is for a 4-year institution. And this is where students coming from different journeys and paths sort of have to be accommodated. And if your institution is going to stay afloat during these difficult times, it has to be focused on career ready, and not have and career ready also has to be. I wonder what other folks think about that. A SWOT analysis, I guess, and what that philosophy means, and if an institution loses its prestige, by moving in its direction, everything I think has to be ready for a transition. And transitions are difficult, and you could be under resourced in transition. So that's the value proposition I think Joe was tying all of this to.
Okay, so we have found ourselves with 4 minutes left at the end of a wonderful conversation. This has been so enlightening, and I hope our audience is getting as much out of it as I have. So I have one last question for everybody. So in looking forward from 5 years from now, what do you think is higher education's biggest opportunity? Which I'm sure, Joe, you're going to say this could be a whole nother webinar, which we will gladly have at some point. But, everybody has maybe 45 seconds. Can we just your high level thoughts on that? I think that would be a great way to kind of wrap up this conversation. Cheryl, can you kick us off?
Sure. So I would just start with leveraging technology, right? So, with AI, with data analytics, there's so much more that we can do that we have access to in terms of supporting our students. But I think also collaboration. And I know Aaron and I have been in conversations about how our institutions can work together more collaboratively. I know that our time is short, but I would just, those are two, leveraging technology, stronger collaboration, and, recognizing the diversity of our learners.
Aaron?
I would say, institutions, higher ed as a whole, were built by employees and faculty with all different lived experiences, all different backgrounds, and we're unique in that we're on the same campus, we're in the same area. Sometimes there's silos. If we can break down some of those silos over the next 5 years, like there's nothing our institutions can't do. There's a lot of challenges we're going to be facing over the next 5 years, but we're equipped with the people and the spirit to solve those problems.
Joe, you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yes, it is a different webinar, Kim. I think this is the opportunity to lean into innovation in my mind, right? This is the time that you have to kind of lean in. I think Cheryl's comments on technology are critical. I think this is where I always encourage folks to really lean into change management and thinking about how to really start understanding what change management is, because higher ed is at a intersection point with everything that's happening, and change is here. So what does that look like? How do we adapt and really think about continuing to stay true to the values and the missions that many of us hold dear? How do we do that differently and lean into innovation?
Great. Ronaldo, my friend. Want to bring this one home?
I'm not sure if I'm coming home with this one. I was really thinking about some of the responses just according to what's been going on for the past few months, and how things that how entire institutions have been sort of trivialized. Um, when you think of higher education, what that provides is really for the future is don't get lost on the fact that the basics also work. We have technology integrated. We have challenges of ethics and societal values and what that means for different communities. That has to continue to be developed and discussed. But what in addition to saving democracy, let me just put that out there as a political science major, as someone that understands educational policy and what that means is. We have to continue to combat misinformation about what higher education means to society. All these folks that are leading the way of denigrating the value of higher ed, ask them where their children go to school, or if they're giving up on the on education themselves. They're not. They just want more of it in the most elite institutions. So I think in higher education, what we can provide if we rely on students is this sort of approach to sort of create a marketing campaign on why it's important, but not only for career readiness, for emotional readiness, psychological health, well-being. For I was thinking about career readiness in the sense, we're 301. Let me just say this: career readiness is not only about a monetary value; it's about an investment in a philosophy of living and of wellness. And I will end there.
Thanks, Ronaldo.
Yes.
I just want to thank all of our panelists. This was an incredible conversation today. And thank you to all of our attendees. We'll see you next time.